If you have a nonprofit, keeping your data secure, I'm sure, is top priority. Now, when you think of outsourcing your accounting, I'm sure that there's an additional level of risk that you think of. There's additional levels, right, to security, to privacy that you're thinking of, and you're wondering, how do you keep your data secure if you're not managing your accounting in-house, right? So your threat factor goes up. You know, you might even see some red flags or think what you think are red flags, but I'm here to dispel a lot of that, right? So in terms of keeping your data secure, if that is something that is of concern to you, then you should keep watching. So when I first mentioned moving to the cloud to potential clients or current clients that are currently using desktop, I get met with questions like, well, who gets access to the accounting file? Like, who controls the access, right? How do you back up data if it's like living in outer space? Because I think that's what, you know, like some people think. And like, who controls the file? Who owns it? You know, how is access determined? You know, how do you remove people? Like, how does that work, right? So I get it. A lot of questions, and today I'm going to give you some answers. Now, many try to compare QuickBooks Desktop with QuickBooks Online, wondering which one is more secure, and I can definitely go into more of those differences and dive deeper into that. So if that is something that you're interested in, then let me know in the comments and I will add that to our video schedule. But for the sake of this video, we're going to be talking about how do you keep your accounting data secure should you choose to outsource. Now, before we get into that, my name is Jameen. I am an accountant. I have done it all at this point, right? Right now, I run Visionary Accounting Group, where we specifically work with nonprofit organizations and we manage their accounting, right? So these are organizations that do not or choose not to manage the accounting in-house, and they prefer to outsource. We become their back-end operation as it relates to the accounting process, right? So we like to call ourselves their outsourced partner, right? Emphasis on the word partner. So let's get into point number one. So who controls access in the first place, right? So first of all, what's interesting is when you use QuickBooks Desktop, your software lives on a computer. And so unless someone has access to that computer, they cannot access that software. And if you've ever tried to remote in, yes, it's doable, but it can be very nuanced. And honestly, it could just simply and frankly, it could be annoying, right? And so when you choose to move to the cloud, you are logging in via the internet. So if you have an internet connection and of course a login and access and all of that stuff, you can access your organization's books. Now, when you move to the cloud, there's this question of who controls access. So you have a primary admin for your accounting file, right? Typically, that tends to be like the executive director, especially if there is not an in-house CFO, controller, bookkeeper, someone like that. Typically, the company admin will either be your executive director or maybe your operations person. That person has the ability to invite users, to remove users, and to also, if they are inviting users, determine what level of access they get. That's also why I do like QuickBooks Online, because I can invite you, add you to my company file, but I can say, I don't want you looking at payroll information. You mainly work in accounts payable, so you should only have access to the AP module, right? So you get to be very specific with the level of access that you give, right? And so it is important to make sure that one, you aren't just inviting people all willy-nilly, but also that you are inviting people, only the people that need access, and you're only giving them the access that's necessary for them to do their job. This kind of rolls into point two, which is the ability to limit or not each person's access, right? And so kind of like I mentioned in that first point, I typically have accountants access. So that company admin also invites us as their accountant. And now there are certain things that we can access and do that the client cannot, because we are the professionals, we are the experts, right? And so there are tools that have been created for us by QuickBooks Online so that we can make sure that we're managing your books well, but also so that you don't go in and kind of, for lack of a better term, mess things up, right? So that's that. But outside of us having accounting access, when you're inviting actual team members, right, you can limit their access. And so we have some clients who maybe the treasurer of the board wants the ability to come in and run reports, but they shouldn't be doing anything else, right? So they only get that access. You might only need be doing AP, or you might only be doing AR, so you don't get payroll access, right? You don't get the ability to see certain information. And so as that admin, you can determine what level of access people have, which also helps that segregation of duty. So it's not like the entire accounting team plus some admin plus some board members are all up in the file, have the ability to manipulate things, change things, because that's when it gets muddied. That's when the audit trail gets fuzzy. And that's also when, outsiders, users of the financial statements, it's like a red flag, because it's like all of these people have access. What's going on here, right? So that's something that you want to maintain control over. Point number 3 is the backup feature, right? And the ability to actually have your data sitting somewhere other than just in this online file, right? And so I hear people talk about like, well, at least on desktop, we can back it up, we can save the files. You can do that in QuickBooks Online, and depending on your level of subscription, it comes with the automatic backup feature. And not only can you automatically back it up, but you also have the ability to go in there and manually back it up. So if you're worried, or if the automatic backup feature ain't happening enough for you, whatever the case may be, you might want to make some changes. So you're wanting to save down the file in its current state. You do have the ability to back up the file. I think there's this notion that because it just lives in the cloud, that once you start changing things and moving things, like there's no way to go back, and you can. And so it's important to really understand the features of your software, what it can do, what it can't do, because your data is secure, right? Now, that's not to say that you also have to do your part, right? And that's kind of like what we talked about in points 1 and 2, where you have to make sure that you don't just have people willy-nilly in the file, and that you have a standard procedure for how things are to be managed in the file. So if the file is supposed to be backed up once a week, making sure that that happens, making sure that it's saved in the right place, making sure that the right people have access, so that if something did happen, you actually have something to pull from, rather. And the last point, right? What do we do at Visionary to keep your data safe? So let's, go into a little story time. So when the height of the pandemic was happening, we were inundated with a lot of requests from potential clients who wanted to work with us, and partly because of this whole new remote virtual world that people were now diving into. But the thing there were so many of these clients who hadn't accessed their accounting records in months, couldn't access their accounting records in months because they were at home. The data lived on either someone's desktop or the desktop in the office. And if you weren't going in the office, that meant you couldn't access. They didn't set up remote login capabilities. So it was something that needed to be done. And so I think it highlighted for a lot of organizations, though, the importance of just having a process in general, right? So like, what happens in regards to business continuity when something is going on in the world that you have no control over, right? And so we ended up migrating a lot of clients from desktop to QuickBooks Online because they realized that managing their finances in desktop just came with a lot more work, and they wanted to simplify and streamline their financial operations, right? And so for those, we've heard also stories for those who, their board didn't approve them moving online, or they just chose not to. There were organizations whose finance department were going in the office because they needed to check the mail, pay bills, close the books, and they couldn't do it from home. And that is something that should not limit you, especially in 2023. And so I think it's very important to think about how you want your organization to run, what your financial operations look like now and what you'd like them to look at. And also, most organizations, right, you tend to be cash strapped. Resources, are typically, strapped. You want to look for ways to streamline how you work, not just in your accounting processes, but overall. And so if there is a way to make things better in this area, then why not do that, right? And so, I hope this video was helpful. I hope it highlights that you don't just move to the cloud and then people just have unlimited access to your organization. That is not the case. It is actually very secure, and there are a lot of things that you can do both internally and through the system to make sure that your data stays secure. Now, if you are managing or running a nonprofit, I really do encourage you to join my email list. That's where I share best practices. That's where you can actually reply and ask specific questions. I share funding opportunities, updates on regulations. The link will be in the description box. And if you have any comments on the video, drop them below. If there's anything you want to learn more about or any topic you want me to dive deeper into, I would totally be open to that. Just let me know. I'll see you guys in the next video.